Hi there, this is Solitaire Ronin from Solitaire Ronin Films, and welcome to a random review. Today's random review comes from 1963 from Italy. It's The Organizer, written and directed by Mario Monicelli, starring Marcelo Mastroianni. This is a Criterion Blu-ray, Region A, spine number 610. This just has an introduction by Monicelli from 2006. But it is a really good introduction, and obviously Criterion, you have the booklet with an essay, as you would expect. Now, this is a film recommended to me by John Sayles. Obviously I'm a huge John Sayles fan, and he talked about this film. I can't even remember what the context was, but it was an interview he gave on one of a special feature somewhere. Might have actually been in Mate One, about how he was a fan of this film, and you can see why, because it's pretty much a John Sayles film. You can see a huge influence on Sayles' Mate One. There's actually a scene that's almost as if Sayles lifted it straight from The Organizer. Also known as Comrades when it came out. It's set in a textile factory in Turin at the turn of the 20th century. So already you're probably saying in your mind, blimey, that sounds like the synopsis of a John Sayles film. But what makes this film absolutely wonderful, and for me a 5-star film, is it's a perfect example of ensemble writing. So Mastroianni by name would be the star of the film, even though he doesn't actually appear until about 20 minutes into the film. But it's more about the characters around him. It's a wonderful ensemble piece, and ensemble writing, which again is a strength of John Sayles' work, is really a strength of this film by Monicelli. You can see its influence on Elio Petri's Working Class Go to Heaven, or Lulu the Tool with Volonté. That's a huge influence in that film, on that film as well. Obviously my Italian film journey is a little bit different from most people. You know, you can criticise me because I haven't seen a ton of Fellini, I haven't seen a ton of Antonioni, I haven't seen a ton of Rossellini. But obviously my recent and past experience, obviously with Pasolini, in my recent run on Francesco Rossi, with Christ Stopped at Bowley, which is a 5-star film for me, my Petri kick that I've been going on, who for me is like unbelievably underrated, with Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, and Petri's Property is No Longer a Theft, which all these films for me are 5-star films. And then Rossi's World War I film, Uomini Contro, or Many Wars Ago, which is just absolutely sensational. And I think, like I said in a video, for me it's actually overtaken Passa Gloria as my favourite World War I film. Just these Italian films that I've kind of discovered fairly recently have just blown me away, and The Organizer is another example of that. So apologies for that little detour. Back to The Organizer. So like I said, this is a ensemble piece, and it's done brilliantly. So Mastroianni, like I said, by name would be the star, but this is a different Mastroianni. For me, this might be Mastroianni's best performance. I haven't seen a ton of Mastroianni films, but this isn't Mastroianni the icon, this isn't Mastroianni the ladies' man, this isn't Mastroianni, you know, just suave, charming, you know, a cinematic god. This is Mastroianni with a scruffy beard and little round glasses that he's always fidgeting with. At times it looks as though he's got a different contact lens in, so his eyes look different. He has shabby clothes on. He wears a battered trilby, which you can see. I mean, he's allegedly the star, but he's got his back to us. So it's a completely different Mastroianni than what we're used to seeing. This film, like quite a few of Francesco Rossi's films, was edited by Marcello Mastroianni's brother, Ruggero. So again, if you've seen Lulu the Tool, if you've seen Mate One, if you've seen even Blue Collar by Schrader, it's familiar ground as far as the workers have had enough. In this factory they work 14 hours a day, which is a bit much, let's be honest, and they obviously have a very short lunch, which is featured hilariously in this film. One character has this roll that is literally the size of a basketball, and I think he takes like 2 bites out of it and then his lunch is over. So they've had enough, and then very much like an incident that happens in Petrie's Lulu the Tool, somebody has an accident in the factory, and this kind of spurs a group of the workers on to, you know, we should maybe do something about this. And then Mastroianni kind of appears about 20 minutes in as this professor who's a friend of the local school teacher, who is giving the workers in the factory night school classes in how to read and write, because at this time in Italy illiteracy was pretty high amongst adults and, you know, factory workers as well. So he's doing this kind of on the side, and Mastroianni comes from being chased out of Genoa, or Genoa even, for essentially trying to get better conditions for workers. So he lands in this small town and he gets involved. Actually, how he gets involved reminds me of how Toshiro Mifune's character in Sanjuro gets involved. He's pretty much trying to sleep, and then he's interrupted by this rumpus, and that's how he kind of gets involved. And then the workers end up going on strike, and it's pretty much see who blinks first between the workers and the bosses. But it is quite good because we get to see the bosses and the pressure put on them by the big boss. So we see both sides of the story. Monicelli said this is a kind of Italian style comedy, which, as we know, doesn't particularly have happy endings. But what makes this film again just elevate to, for me, 5 out of 5 type material is the fact that it's really funny. There are moments of tragedy in the film. There's moments that are really moving and will bring a tear to a glass eye, but it's also really funny. And Monicelli's script just does that balance so well. It's not jarring because it's life, and life at times can be absurdly funny even within tragedy. There's just little moments, which again I'm not going to spoil or get into because you really should watch this film, but there's just little character moments And when tragedy does happen, sometimes you can perhaps predict if it happens, but other times it just comes out of the blue. It's genuinely upsetting, but then there will be some humour not that long after it, but it still works. But like I said, it's a textbook for ensemble writing, because at 130 minutes, you could argue it's a shade too long, but I mean, that's quibbling. But it's a world you want to be in, even though it's not a world you want to work in. But you certainly want to spend more time with these characters, because they are like an extended family. So even though they bicker and they fight, and obviously some of them want to go back to work, others want to stay, out for better conditions. But it is very family-like, and you do really appreciate these characters and want to spend time with these characters, which again, when tragedy happens, it affects you more as a viewer. And again, sometimes if there's so many characters, your empathy or whatever, or your interest is spread too thinly, whereas this one manages to do it so well. There's a lot of French actors in the film. Bernard Blier is in it, and you'll probably recognise other faces as well. But because it focuses on Mastroianni, but he kind of drifts in and out of the film. And there's kind of 5 members of the head kind of committee of the factory workers who go out on strike. So it's kind of loosely, it follows the 5 of them and their families and whatever. And we also have just a wonderful relationship between a teenager who works in the factory and his 9-year-old son, who doesn't want to stay in school. He wants to work in the factory, and of course the teenager is like, I don't want you working in the factory. And his sister falls for a soldier who's dealing out soup when they're on strike, and then the soldiers come back into the film at a later point. So the relationships between all of them are just wonderful and complex, and it plays out later in the film. It's just such a great film. Again, like John Sayles films, the synopsis perhaps sounds dry and not very interesting, but again, the writing is just so good that you care about these characters, you're invested in the characters. Yes, you could argue the bosses are perhaps a bit one note, but again, we do get from their perspective when they have to answer to the big boss, which is an interesting side. So yes, you could argue they're one note, but there's some nuance to those characters as well. The ending of the film might upset some people, but again, I'm not going to get into it, but let's just say not everything is resolved as we would be used to if, say, it was an American film. That's all I'll say about that. But it's just spectacularly good. Again, there's a whole batch of Italian films that I have seen for the first time over the past 18 months or so that have just blown me away. Again, the Elio Petri films, the Francesco Rossi films have been pretty spectacular. Monicelli made 56 films, or directed 56 films, I believe. So I'm going to have to try and see more Monicelli films. But the organiser is well worth trying to check out. Like I say, that's a Region A Blu-ray, but I'm sure you'll be able to pick it up in DVD if you don't have Region A capabilities. And again, Mastroianni for me, it's amongst the best work that I've seen him do, because again, like all the great actors, it's all about his eyes. So he does lots of kind of physical things just by using his eyes. Because again, because he's not, Mastroianni, the legend, the star in the film. He did a few films with Monicelli, but he's, like I said, he's scruffy in this, and he's not the star, even though obviously he's the named actor. It's just a truly wonderful film. For me, another Italian 5 out of 5, and I think Italy is cementing its place as far as non-English speaking languages for me, behind Japan and France, I think. But like everything else, I just need to watch more Italian films. But again, me being the contrarian that I am, I kind of try and avoid the so-called films that you must see, and I tend to obviously go in a slightly different direction. But all I can say is John Sayles is a wonderful filmmaker, and he also has tremendous taste, because I would highly recommend you check out The Organizer by Mario Monicelli, starring Marcelo Mastroianni, if you haven't already. So thanks very much for watching this random review. Please let me know in the comments if you've seen The Organizer or Comrades and what you thought of it, or if you've seen other Monicelli films, what should be the next Monicelli that I try and check out. And hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.